The setup, under the studio lights. The studio lights were hot and unforgiving, casting a sterile glow on everything they touched. The crowd buzzed in low murmurs, barely contained excitement fizzing through the air like static electricity. Tonight wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was different. The producers knew it. The camera crew knew it. Even the janitor, who rarely paused in his duties, lingered near the backstage curtain just to catch a glimpse of what was about to unfold. Seated calmly on the sleek gray interview couch was none other than Keanu Reeves. He wore a simple black suit, unbuttoned at the collar. No tie, no pretense. His hair, shoulder length and slightly tousled, framed a face worn but kind, a face that had seen loss and love, chaos and calm. His demeanor was, as always, disarmingly gentle. His hands rested lightly in his lap. He didn't fidget. He didn't scroll on a phone. He was present, completely and totally present. Across from him sat Jason Carter, the infamous talk show host known more for his cutting jabs than his compassion. His show, Straight Shot with Carter, was notorious for viral moments, clickbait headlines, and guest meltdowns. It wasn't uncommon for an actor to leave the set in tears or fury. Jason loved getting under people's skin. And tonight, his sights were set on Keanu. The theme music faded, applause erupted, and the live feed officially began. Jason leaned in with a charismatic smirk, microphone clipped perfectly to his lapel. He fiddled with his cue cards theatrically, letting the tension build. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with a dramatic flair, "welcome to Straight Shot. Tonight, we have someone very special with us. He's been called the Internet's boyfriend, the nicest guy in Hollywood, and possibly, just possibly, the most grounded celebrity alive. Give it up for Keanu Reeves." Another round of applause roared from the studio audience. Keanu offered a polite smile and a small wave. Nothing over the top, just genuine acknowledgement. Jason didn't waste time. "So, Keanu," he said, crossing one leg over the other, "let's get straight to it. You've had a career that spans decades. You've made millions. You've got fans who practically worship you. But let's get real here." Keanu nodded slightly, his expression unreadable but calm. Jason continued, the smirk never leaving his face. "You're rich. You're famous. You live a life of luxury most people only dream of. So all this humble Keanu stuff, don't you think it's a little fake?" The audience gasped. A few people laughed nervously. Keanu blinked slowly, then offered a soft chuckle. "You know, Jason," he said, "it's interesting how people measure someone's character based on what they think they have." Jason leaned forward, excited. "So you admit it, it's all an act?" "No," Keanu said simply. "I'm saying I don't measure my worth by money or roles or headlines. I measure it by how I treat people. And I think that's something we all could do a little more of." The crowd clapped, softly at first, then louder. Jason's smile twitched slightly, his moment of control slipping just a little. "But come on," Jason pressed. "You fly coach sometimes. You've been seen giving your seat to strangers, buying meals for crews, donating quietly to hospitals. Isn't that just PR?" Keanu leaned forward now, his eyes finally locking with Jason's in a way that changed the entire energy of the room. "Jason," he said, his voice steady, "when my sister had leukemia, she spent years in treatment. I saw children in hospital beds who never got visitors. I saw parents choosing between groceries and prescriptions. I saw nurses work double shifts just to cover for each other. That wasn't PR. That was life. And it changed me." Silence. No one moved, not even Jason. Keanu's voice grew softer, but somehow more powerful. "When you've lost a child, when you've buried someone you love, when you've sat in a hospital hallway all night because there's nothing else you can do, that's when you learn humility. That's when you realize this," he gestured around the lavish studio, "isn't what matters." The crowd burst into applause again, this time louder, more heartfelt. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair, searching his cards for a comeback that wouldn't come. But Keanu wasn't done. "You want a story, Jason?" Keanu asked, tilting his head slightly. "I'll give you one." He sat back, eyes fixed on something distant in his memory. "It was years ago. I was on set in New York. The crew was working through the night, exhausted, freezing, hungry. One of the grips, a guy named Paul, he hadn't eaten since the morning. I asked why. He said he was sending his per diem to his kid's school for lunch money. I didn't make a speech. I didn't post about it. I just walked over, gave him what I could, and sat down next to him like a human being. That's what kindness looks like. It's quiet. It's consistent. And it doesn't need an audience." A few people in the audience had tears in their eyes. Jason was stunned. "Why haven't you ever talked about that?" "Because compassion doesn't need cameras," Keanu said. Jason tried to pivot. "So are you saying celebrities have a duty to be kind?" Keanu smiled again. "I think people have a duty to be kind. Fame doesn't excuse cruelty. And anonymity doesn't justify it either. We're all going through something. And if I have a platform, I want to use it to remind people of that." The interview could have ended there. It should have. But Jason, desperate to regain control, asked one final question. "Okay, but if you really believe that, why keep doing movies? Why stay in the spotlight at all?" Keanu looked around the room. His gaze swept over the audience. The clapping hands, the tear-filled eyes, the people leaning forward in their seats. "I make movies," he said slowly, "because stories matter. Because when someone watches a film and feels seen, or hopeful, or inspired, that can change a day. Sometimes, it can even change a life. And I don't take that lightly." That answer silenced even Jason. The show wrapped minutes later, but the internet didn't wait. Within hours, clips of Keanu's answers went viral. Hashtags like #KeanuWisdom and #RealHero trended across platforms. Millions were moved not by scandal or drama, but by one man's quiet strength, his refusal to be baited into arrogance or defensiveness. He hadn't destroyed the reporter with rage or insult. He had done it with truth, with heart, and with the unshakable belief that kindness is stronger than ego. And this was just the beginning. The backlash, and Keanu's powerful silence. The morning after the interview was not calm. It was thunder. From the moment the sun peeked over the Hollywood Hills, the internet was ablaze. Clips from Straight Shot with Jason Carter spread like wildfire. People shared it, quoted it, subtweeted it, and debated over every syllable. But one thing was certain: Keanu Reeves' calm dismantling of the host had struck a global nerve. The moment wasn't a performance. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't sensational in the way today's media often demanded. And that was what made it unforgettable. Still, not everyone was applauding. Behind closed doors, in sleek glass buildings and executive boardrooms, producers scrambled. Studio heads called emergency PR meetings. The network that aired Straight Shot wasn't used to being on the receiving end of such massive public critique. Sponsors were nervous. Viewers were angry. Even some of Jason Carter's own colleagues started to question the future of the show. But no one was more panicked than Jason himself. He sat in his penthouse office on the 20th floor of a high-rise in downtown LA, eyes glued to his phone, his Twitter feed a relentless scroll of condemnation. At Theory Alexa, I watched that interview live. Jason Carter tried to belittle Keanu Reeves and ended up schooling himself. Wow. At Truth Teller 21, this is what grace under pressure looks like. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard. #Keanu Reeves, #ClassAct. At Film Critic No, watching Keanu Reeves destroy that arrogant host without ever being unkind, that's a masterclass in humanity. Jason tossed his phone across the room. His assistant, Marla, peeked her head through the door. "You okay?" "No," he muttered. "I look like a jerk, a punching bag. Everyone thinks I got destroyed." Marla hesitated. "You kind of did." Jason glared at her. "Do you work for me or for Twitter?" She sighed and slipped out, knowing better than to push when his ego was bruised. Meanwhile, Keanu was nowhere to be seen. Reporters camped outside his Los Angeles home. Paparazzi stalked his usual coffee haunts. Entertainment magazines begged for an exclusive comment. But Keanu didn't say a word. Instead, he boarded a flight to Portland, Oregon, quietly, in economy class, wearing a plain hoodie and jeans. No entourage, no manager, just him and a well-worn paperback copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. The flight attendant recognized him. So did the elderly couple in the aisle across from him. But no one bothered him. Somehow, Keanu had this effect. You didn't feel like interrupting his peace. He wasn't escaping. He was going somewhere important. The place that kept him grounded. The small hospital near the outskirts of Portland didn't look like much from the outside. Faded walls, cracked parking lot. But inside, it was sacred ground for Keanu. It was here that his sister Kim had undergone her most aggressive rounds of leukemia treatment. It was here he had spent sleepless nights reading to her, rubbing her back when the pain got too much. It was here he had shared vending machine dinners with nurses who never complained. And it was here he came now, not for headlines or applause, but for clarity. Keanu entered through the back entrance. The staff knew him. No cameras followed. No autographs were asked. The nurses greeted him with warm smiles and quiet hugs. He spent hours there. He brought coffee for the night shift team. He talked with children in the cancer ward, sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping them color or listening to their dreams. He didn't mention the interview. He didn't need to. Because for Keanu, the world outside that hospital was loud, chaotic, full of opinions. But here was truth. Backlash of a different kind. Jason Carter, meanwhile, was trying desperately to salvage his image. He issued a half-hearted apology online. "If anyone took offense at my style, I apologize. It's my job to ask hard questions. No disrespect to Mr. Reeves, whom I admire." The post had over 20,000 comments, most of them angry. People weren't buying it. A popular YouTube channel even did a full breakdown of the interview, pointing out how Jason tried to provoke Keanu and failed miserably. It titled the video, "Keanu Reeves, Calm, Cool, and the Classiest Clapback in TV History." Late-night comedians roasted Jason. Memes flooded the internet. In one, Keanu was shown calmly sipping tea while Jason's face melted like in Indiana Jones. Another showed Keanu meditating on a mountaintop while Jason screamed into a mirror. It wasn't just backlash. It was a cultural shift. People were hungry for sincerity, for humility, for role models who didn't need to scream to be heard. And Keanu, in his silence, had said more than 100 press releases ever could. The letter that changed everything. 3 days later, while still in Portland, Keanu received a handwritten letter. It wasn't from a fan or a journalist. It was from a high school English teacher in Kansas. Inside, the note read, "Dear Mr. Reeves, I showed your interview to my students today. Most of them don't know much about movies from the 90s, but they know truth when they see it. One of my quietest students, Miguel, stood up after we watched your words and said, 'That man didn't just answer questions. He showed us how to be better people.' I wanted you to know that your words mattered. To a classroom of teenagers in a small town. To me. To many. Thank you for being real. With gratitude, Mrs. Linda McGuire." Keanu folded the letter slowly and smiled. The real viral moment. What the world didn't see, what no viral clip could capture, was what happened next. Keanu picked up his phone. Not to tweet, not to post, but to call his team. "I want to do something," he said, "not about the interview. Bigger." He didn't elaborate, but his team knew what that meant. Keanu wasn't interested in revenge. He wasn't looking to clap back harder. He wanted to build something that would last. He started contacting hospitals, schools, small community centers. He wanted to launch a new initiative, one that connected kids and teens with mentorship programs in film, music, writing, and healing arts. A place where kindness was currency and empathy was leadership. He named it Project Light. It wasn't about him. His name wouldn't even be on the website. But the foundation had been born, in the silence that followed a storm, back in the spotlight, but on his terms. A week later, Keanu reappeared. Not on another talk show, not at a red carpet, but at a community center in Chicago, sitting in a circle with a group of teenagers from low-income neighborhoods talking about storytelling. Everyone has a voice, he told them, and the world needs yours. Cameras were invited, only because the center asked for help getting attention to their funding campaign. But Keanu didn't speak to the press. He spoke to the kids. Later that day, a viral clip emerged, not from a TV station, but from a girl's iPhone. It showed Keanu laughing with a boy who had just read his first short story aloud. The caption read, "Keanu told my brother that his words matter. My brother hasn't smiled like that in months. Thank you. #Project Light." The internet went wild. This time, it wasn't Keanu responding to arrogance. It was Keanu responding to the world, with action, not anger. And that, more than anything, made the loudest noise of all. Jason's reckoning, and an unexpected visitor. The wind had changed. It wasn't just the public tide turning. Something far deeper had shifted. Jason Carter could feel it like a low, cold ripple under his skin. For years, he'd controlled narratives, guided interviews like a puppeteer. With a smirk and a sharp question, he had reduced stars, politicians, and icons to viral soundbites. But now, he was the headline. The viral clip of Keanu Reeves' calm, thoughtful takedown had surpassed 20 million views in just 5 days. Every major media outlet covered it, not because it was explosive, but because it was rare. One man's poise had held up a mirror to an entire culture obsessed with ego, and millions saw something they hadn't realized they'd been craving. Grace. The studio in silence. Jason's dressing room was unusually quiet. No assistants rushing in and out. No makeup artists chatting. Just the faint hum of overhead lights and the ghost of a man staring into his own reflection. He looked tired. Not physically. Jason had always taken care of his appearance. Botox, supplements, private trainers. No, this exhaustion came from the inside. He sat at the edge of the leather couch, flipping through printouts of online headlines. Jason Carter's fall from grace. Keanu's kindness exposes TV's cruelty. When a soft voice shouted louder than an arrogant one. This is why Keanu Reeves is different. He tossed the papers aside, but the guilt clung like smoke. He remembered the look on Keanu's face. Not angry, not smug, but steady. As if nothing Jason said could shake a man who had already made peace with himself long ago. That terrified Jason, because beneath the layers of sarcasm and snark, Jason was anything but at peace. A ghost from the past. Later that evening, Jason sat alone in his sprawling penthouse. The walls were lined with modern art and awards. Emmys, framed magazine covers, a giant portrait of himself, arms crossed, staring out like a titan of talk shows. He poured himself a scotch, but didn't drink it. The weight of recent days had made him restless. That's when the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone, no deliveries. No friends left in his inner circle, at least not the kind who came unannounced. When he opened the door, he blinked in disbelief. Standing there, wearing a wool coat and a humble smile, was his mother. The woman who knew his truth. "Mom, don't look so shocked," she said gently. "I figured if I didn't come now, you'd spend another week pretending everything's fine." Jason stepped aside, stunned. You didn't call. I knew you'd say no." She walked past him into the condo, her eyes scanning the expensive furniture and impersonal design. It was luxurious, sure, but cold. Like a showroom, not a home. "Still living in a museum, I see," she remarked, sitting down. Jason sat across from her, unsure what to say. He hadn't seen her in almost a year. She'd always disapproved of how he treated people on his show. She hated the sensationalism, the spectacle. "I saw the interview," she said. Jason winced. "Let me guess, you're here to say, 'I told you so.'" "No," she said softly. "I'm here because I'm worried about you." He stared at her, the mask slipping. "What if they're right, Mom? What if I am just noise?" She took his hand, something she hadn't done since he was a child, and said, "You weren't always like this." Jason's throat tightened. "You remember Mrs. Nguyen?" she asked. He nodded. "His 7th grade teacher. She called me once, years ago," his mother continued. She said, "Jason is sharp, quick, but he needs to learn that listening is louder than speaking." Jason lowered his gaze. "I thought maybe you'd grow out of it," she added, "but you turned it into a career." "I thought being provocative was the point," Jason whispered. "That being memorable meant being brutal." "And now?" she asked. "I don't know anymore," he admitted. "Keanu. He didn't fight. He didn't insult. He just was, and it made everything I've built feel hollow." His mother nodded. "Because deep down, you know you want to be like that too." That truth hit him like a train, a call that changed his night. After his mother left, Jason sat in the dark. Then he did something no one expected. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he thought he'd deleted. It rang twice. Then a voice answered, warm and familiar. "Keanu Reeves." Jason almost hung up, but he didn't. "It's Jason Carter," he said quickly. I wanted to talk." A pause. Then Keanu's voice, calm as ever. "All right. Talk." Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he began. "I watched the interview again and again, and I realize now that I was trying to make you look small, but you didn't shrink. You stood taller by staying quiet." Another pause. "I'm not calling to defend myself," Jason added. I want to understand how you do it, how you stay so grounded." Keanu's reply was simple. "I've fallen enough to know what the ground feels like." Jason was silent. Keanu continued. "Most people run from humility. They think kindness is weakness, but it's the opposite. Being kind means you have nothing to prove." Jason swallowed. "And how do I start over? When everything I've built was based on ego." Keanu didn't judge, didn't lecture. He just said, "Start by telling the truth. The truth in public." The next morning, Jason did something his producers strongly advised against. He opened his show with no intro music, no flashing lights. Just him, alone, sitting on a stool, no cards, no teleprompter. He looked directly into the camera. "I want to start today's episode differently," he said. "Not as Jason the host, but as Jason the human being." The crew behind the scenes froze. Jason continued. "Last week, I interviewed Keanu Reeves. I tried to challenge him, maybe even embarrass him. And instead of firing back, he gave me something I didn't deserve. Grace." He paused. "And it made me question who I've become." The audience was dead silent. Jason went on, raw and unfiltered. "I built a career on tearing people down. I told myself it was just a show, just entertainment. But watching that interview again, I saw something I'd never had the courage to be. Present, humble, real." He took a deep breath. "I don't know what this means for my future on this show. Maybe I'll step away. Maybe I'll rebuild. But I do know this. I owe Keanu Reeves, and all of you, an apology." The clip aired live. And once again, the internet lit up. But this time, it wasn't mockery. It was something else. Hope. Keanu's quiet response. The same day, Keanu released a short written statement. Just a paragraph. No interviews. No red carpet soundbites. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding. I appreciate Jason's honesty, and I hope it inspires others to pause before judging, to ask before assuming, and to listen before speaking. We're all learning. Let's give each other space to grow. The message was shared over 5 million times in 24 hours because it wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. Letters from strangers. The story behind the viral spark. The world didn't change in a day. But for a brief, shimmering moment, it felt like it could. As Keanu Reeves' interview clip continued to spread across platforms like wildfire, something remarkable began happening. It wasn't just likes or shares or reactions. It was responses, not from celebrities, not from influencers, but from everyday people. People who had been quietly watching from the sidelines of life. People who had been bruised by the world, but never broken. People who saw in Keanu's calm humility something they hadn't seen in a very long time. Hope. The letters begin. Keanu didn't have a public email. He never posted on social media. But that didn't stop the messages from coming in. His literary agent, Claire, was the first to notice it. She was in her New York office sipping coffee when her inbox pinged. Then pinged again. And again. Within minutes, she had over 400 new emails, all with subject lines like, "Keanu's words saved me. Please tell him thank you. He doesn't even know what he did for me." Claire, a no-nonsense businesswoman with 2 decades in the industry, had seen her share of fan letters. But this was different. She started reading, and tears filled her eyes. The single mother from Detroit. One letter read, "Dear Mr. Reeves, I don't know if this will reach you, but I just watched your interview, and I had to write. I'm a single mom. I work 2 jobs. Most days, I feel invisible. I'm so tired, so scared that I'm failing my kids. But when you talked about the nurse who worked double shifts, about how kindness doesn't need cameras, I cried, because you saw people like me. Thank you for reminding me that what I do matters, even if no one sees it. With love, Monique C., the war veteran in Arizona." Another email came from an old Marine named Victor. "Sir, I served in Afghanistan, lost my leg to an IED. I came back angry, bitter. I turned off the world. But last night, I watched you talk to that smug reporter, not with hate, but with dignity. It shook me, made me realize I've been wasting the time I was given. This morning, I signed up to volunteer at the local VA hospital. My first time walking in there since I left. I don't know what you believe in, but I believe this. You were sent to remind people that silence can be powerful, that pain doesn't make you cruel, and that strength is quiet. Semper Fi." Victor H. Claire reaches out. Claire called Keanu that night. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but you need to hear these." Keanu was at home, sitting on the floor in his living room, with soft piano music playing in the background. A candle flickered nearby. His dog, Daisy, rested her head on his knee. Claire began reading some of the letters, one after another. Keanu didn't speak. He just listened. And then he whispered, "These people are the real story. The spark that lit a fire." The next day, without fanfare, Keanu asked his small team to help him build something simple. A website. No ads. No merchandise. Just a place where people could share their stories. A place where kindness could live. Where broken people could feel seen. He called it The Quiet Voice. The tagline: "Kindness doesn't need a stage." Submissions poured in. Teachers, social workers, truck drivers, elderly widows, teens battling depression. Each letter was like a window into the soul of someone fighting battles no one else could see. And every single one mentioned the same thing. When Keanu spoke, it felt like someone finally saw me. Behind the curtain, a teenage girl's story. Among all the letters, one stood out. It came in a small floral patterned envelope, handwritten in purple ink. No return address. Inside was a letter from a 14-year-old girl named Elsie. Dear Mr. Reeves, I've never written a letter like this before. I live in Idaho. I don't have many friends. I get picked on because I'm shy and wear hand-me-downs. I started skipping lunch so I wouldn't have to sit alone. Last week, I was planning to hurt myself. But then, I watched your interview. I don't know why. It just popped up on YouTube. You said, "We're all going through something," and it made me stop. Because for the first time, I thought, maybe I'm not the only one who feels like this. Maybe someone out there would be sad if I disappeared. So I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I even joined a writing club at school yesterday. Thank you for saving me without even knowing it. Elsie. Keanu held that letter for a long time and cried. Jason sees the impact. Across town, Jason Carter was in the middle of a forced hiatus. His show had been temporarily pulled by the network for review and restructuring. The executives didn't say it outright, but Jason knew his time was probably up. Yet, strangely, he wasn't angry. He spent his days reading, walking, reflecting. One day, he got a message forwarded by his team. A teenager from Milwaukee had written to him. Mr. Carter, you don't know me. I used to laugh at your show. I liked how you made people squirm. But after that interview with Keanu Reeves, I realized something. I've been doing the same thing at school. Tearing people down because I thought it made me look cool. I apologized to a kid I used to bully. We talked. He's actually really nice. I don't know if your show's coming back, but I hope you come back a different man, because I think you could help people if you tried. Jason stared at the screen, and something inside him broke. Not in a bad way. In a necessary way. Reconnection. Jason reached out again. Not to ask for forgiveness this time, but to ask for a meeting. Not in a studio. Not for the cameras. Just one man to another. Keanu agreed. They met in a quiet coffee shop in Echo Park. No press. No security. Just 2 cups of black coffee. 2 men in plain clothes. Jason sat nervously and said, I've been reading the letters. Keanu smiled gently. They're not written to me. They're written to all of us. They're reminders. Jason nodded. I used to think the only way to be remembered was to be loud. And now? Keanu asked. I think I'd rather be good than be remembered. Keanu reached out and patted Jason's shoulder. Then maybe that interview was worth more than we thought. A message that echoes. That week, The Quiet Voice published a special message on its homepage. Sometimes, a whisper travels farther than a scream. Thank you for being part of this journey. You are not alone. You are seen. Tens of thousands of people left comments beneath it. Each one a story. Each one a spark. From screens to streets, a movement is born. The video had played across millions of screens. Smartphones on subway rides. Tablets on kitchen counters. TV screens in living rooms lit dimly at midnight. Keanu Reeves' calm dismantling of arrogance had been watched and rewatched, paused, dissected, quoted. But something rare was happening now. It didn't stop at screens. It spilled out into real life. What began as a single interview between a Hollywood star and a once arrogant host was quietly blooming into a global ripple of kindness, reflection, and change. Not because of controversy, not because of outrage, but because of truth. And truth, when spoken softly and lived sincerely, can shake the foundations of the world. Whispers in the schoolyard. It started small. In a quiet suburb of Minneapolis, a 5th-grade teacher named Mrs. Patel played Keanu's interview for her students, not as a lesson in celebrity, but in empathy. Afterward, she asked a simple question. Who in your life shows kindness without needing attention? One boy raised his hand and said, My brother. He brings me an extra sandwich every day, even though no one tells him to. Another girl whispered, My neighbor. She leaves flowers on people's doorsteps when someone is sick. That day, the students formed a club, the Quiet Voices, Their mission was simple: do one silent act of kindness each day. Don't post it. Don't announce it. Just do it. Within weeks, other schools across the city had joined in. A barbershop in Baltimore. Miles away, a barber named Lorenzo watched the interview late one night after closing his shop. He was no stranger to pain. His younger brother had been killed in a senseless act of violence 2 years ago. Since then, Lorenzo had battled anger, depression, and the crushing weight of grief. But Keanu's words pierced through something in him. We're all going through something. Lorenzo rewatched that line 5 times. The next morning, he printed it on a poster and taped it to his mirror. Then, for every kid that came into his barbershop that week, he gave a free haircut. And more importantly, he talked to them. Not about fades or trends, but about life. About being good men. About listening. About how strong men aren't loud. They're kind. One kid told his mom, "Mr. Lorenzo said I matter." The mom cried. That week, Lorenzo renamed his shop Quiet King's Barbershop. The spark in South Africa. Across the globe, in Cape Town, South Africa, a community youth worker named Thandi stumbled on the clip while browsing YouTube for motivational videos. She had been struggling to keep her youth center afloat. Underfunded, understaffed, overwhelmed. The kids in her neighborhood were slipping into gangs or silence, and she was losing hope. But then she heard Keanu say, "I don't measure my worth by what I have. I measure it by how I treat people." Thandi paused the video, sat in silence, and cried. That week, she gathered her teens and told them about a new project, the Human Mirror. They would spend 1 hour each week standing in front of each other, not judging, not criticizing, but saying, "Here's what I see in you that's good." The results were powerful. One boy said, "I've never heard anyone say something nice about me before." Another girl whispered, "That changed something in me." Keanu didn't know their names, but his ripple had reached them. A shift in the media. Back in the U.S., something strange was happening in media circles. Writers who usually chased scandals began pitching human interest stories. A popular news anchor opened her evening segment not with crime or disaster, but with a story of a janitor who left inspirational notes on students' lockers. Talk show hosts began referencing Keanu's interview not as entertainment, but as a challenge. One viral blog post summed it up best. Keanu didn't yell. He didn't boast. He just told the truth, and the world leaned in. The culture was hungry. Hungry for real. Hungry for humility. And in that hunger, a movement was being born. The rise of Project Light. Keanu had kept working quietly in the background. Project Light, his mentorship program, had initially launched with just 3 centers: Los Angeles, Portland, and Chicago. But after the letters, after the viral clip, after the wave of kindness that followed, the demand exploded. Within 6 weeks, over 700 schools, shelters, and youth centers had applied to partner with Project Light. And Keanu's only request: no billboards, no ads with my face, just action. The mission was simple: empower youth through storytelling, music, film, and empathy. Teach emotional literacy, not just literacy. Build self-worth without needing applause. One of the first graduates of the pilot program, a 17-year-old girl named Marley, was invited to speak at a community fundraiser. She stood on stage, nervous but proud, and said, "Before this program, I thought my voice didn't matter. But I wrote a poem, and Keanu read it out loud in our circle. He looked at me and said, 'The world needs more of this.' That moment changed everything." Marley's poem was later published on the Quiet Voice website. It read, in part, "They told me quiet girls go unnoticed, but my whisper made a ripple. Now I speak with soft thunder." Keanu in the background. Despite all the movement, Keanu remained largely in the background. No press tours, no interviews, no viral self-congratulatory videos. Just a man in black jeans, showing up at community centers, sharing meals with volunteers, reading scripts written by teenagers, and listening more than speaking. Reporters tried to catch him in public, but he always gave the same answer. "It's not about me." It never was. A call from the United Nations. 2 months after the interview aired, Keanu received a letter from the United Nations. They wanted him to speak at the World Youth Peace Summit, not as a movie star, but as a voice of compassion. His team was hesitant. It would bring him back into the global spotlight. They warned him the cameras would be relentless. Keanu's answer? "Then let's use the cameras to show something that matters." He accepted. A movement with no leader. What made the movement different was this. There was no central figure, no political banner, no Keanu cult. Instead, there were people, quiet, humble, wounded, healing people, choosing to be better. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. But it was everywhere. In the woman who bought a stranger's groceries at a market in Dublin. In the kid who stood up for a bullied friend in a cafeteria in Mumbai. In the CEO who donated anonymously to fund after-school programs in Detroit. In the teenager who taped a sticky note to every desk in her class that read, "You matter, even on your worst day." The movement didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It was a whisper. But somehow, everyone was hearing it. The speech, and the moment that changed the world. It was a cool autumn morning in Geneva. The air was crisp, the sky clear. Outside the United Nations headquarters, world leaders, diplomats, peacekeepers, youth representatives, and activists gathered for the annual World Youth Peace Summit. Flags from nearly every nation flapped gently in the breeze as photographers snapped pictures of young dreamers from every continent, each one hoping to be part of something greater than themselves. But today was different. This summit was not just about policy or speeches or formalities. Today, there was a buzz, a murmur across the courtyard, across social media, across the globe. Because Keanu Reeves, a man known for dodging the limelight, a man who had avoided political forums and global stages, had agreed to speak. And not as a celebrity, not as an actor, but as a witness to the power of kindness. A room full of power, waiting on silence. Inside the Grand Hall, delegates from over 100 countries filled the seats. Youth activists, some barely out of high school, sat beside Nobel laureates. Cameras were mounted discreetly, their red recording lights glowing softly. Millions were tuned in to the live stream across platforms. The Secretary General opened with a brief welcome, then turned toward the stage. "And now," she said, "we are honored to welcome someone who has reminded the world that empathy, humility, and action can go hand in hand. Mr. Keanu Reeves." The applause was immediate, but not wild. It was reverent. Not the kind of applause reserved for a movie star, but the kind reserved for someone who has done something that matters. Keanu stepped onto the stage with quiet steps. No suit, no stylist. He wore a simple black shirt, jeans, and a gray blazer. His hair was pulled back, his beard trimmed. In his hand, he held a folded piece of paper, but he didn't open it. Instead, he looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, skeptical and hopeful. Then, for several long seconds, he just stood in complete silence. The room held its breath. The speech. Then he spoke. Not loud. Not rehearsed, but from somewhere deep and very real. "I almost didn't come today." He paused, letting that sit. "Because I'm not a politician. I'm not a scholar. I'm not trained in diplomacy or peace talks." He looked around, eyes meeting faces without hesitation. "I'm just a man who's made mistakes, a man who's lost people he loved, a man who, like most of you, has been angry, afraid, and at times very alone. But I came anyway. Because someone once said to me, silence doesn't mean indifference. It can mean listening." He took a breath. "And when I was silent during that interview, I wasn't trying to win. I was trying not to lose myself." A murmur of emotion rolled through the crowd. "I've lived through fame, through wealth, through grief that nearly crushed me. I've held the hands of friends dying too young. I've walked through days where the world felt hollow. And in all that, I've learned one thing. He paused. Kindness is the only thing that lasts. Silence. Then nods. Eyes glistened. I've received letters from kids who were going to end their lives, but didn't. From veterans who found the courage to reconnect. From mothers, janitors, barbers, bus drivers. They all said the same thing, not in words, but in feeling. I want to be seen. I want to matter, even just a little. He unfolded the paper in his hand, revealing one of the letters. This one's from a girl named Elsie, 14 years old. She said my interview made her put down the blade she was planning to use on herself. Instead, she joined a writing club. A hush swept over the room. Elsie, he continued, voice slightly trembling, if you're watching, this is your speech. You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you were worth saving. The moment, the world cried. Then it happened. Keanu pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket. I brought something with me, he said, holding it up. It's from Elsie. He unfolded the note she had mailed him weeks earlier. Her handwriting wobbled, but beautiful. Purple ink. No punctuation. Just raw truth. He read it slowly. I thought my life was too quiet to matter. But your quiet made me loud inside. I don't want to die anymore. I want to speak. There was not a single dry eye in the room. Not the diplomats. Not the translators in the glass booths. Not even the security guards. The live stream chat exploded in hearts and comments like, "We love you, Elsie. This is what real leadership looks like. I'm crying at my desk right now." This is more than a speech. This is a call to be human again. A standing ovation without applause. Keanu stepped back from the podium, but held up his hand. "No need to clap," he said gently. "Just promise me this." He looked out again. "Promise me you'll be kind when no one's watching. That you'll listen before you speak. That you'll check on someone today, anyone. And that you'll remember, we are more alike than we are different." He smiled. That's how peace starts, not in treaties, not in tweets, but in the tiny invisible choices we make when no one is keeping score. He nodded, then walked off stage, and the crowd stood. No cheering, no clapping, just standing, heads bowed, eyes full. Because sometimes the loudest ovation is silent. Around the world. Within minutes, #Elsie trended globally. The Quiet Voice website was overwhelmed with over 2 million submissions in 24 hours. Schools played the speech in morning assemblies. Churches quoted it in sermons. A protest in Berlin paused their chants just to play the clip over loudspeakers. At a prison in Louisiana, a group of inmates asked their warden if they could start a quiet change circle where they'd write letters to kids in need. The warden said yes. The world had not changed overnight. But something had shifted. Hearts had cracked open. And light was pouring in, full circle. A letter from Elsie and the final act of grace. The sun was just beginning to rise over the Oregon mountains, spilling gold across the skyline like spilled honey. Keanu Reeves sat on a quiet bench near the back of a small retreat center tucked away in the pine forests. No reporters, no fans, no cameras, just the stillness of nature, birdsong weaving through morning air, and the faint whisper of wind threading through the trees. It had been 6 months since his now famous speech at the United Nations Youth Peace Summit. 6 months since he read a letter from a 14-year-old girl named Elsie that moved the world to tears. 6 months since millions began to see kindness, not as weakness, but as a radical act of strength. The movement had become a quiet revolution. The Quiet Voice had expanded to over 30 countries. Project Light now operated in 200-plus community centers. Schools worldwide used his speech as part of their curriculum on empathy and resilience. Keanu never once stepped in front of a camera to talk about it. He never accepted awards or gave interviews. He just kept showing up, in classrooms, shelters, and hospitals. And today, someone was coming to meet him. Someone who had once believed her life didn't matter. The girl with purple ink. Her hands trembled as she stepped out of the car. Elsie Carter, 14. Hair pulled back in a loose braid. Nervous. Dressed in a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers worn from time and story. She clutched a journal tightly against her chest. Her guidance counselor and a representative from Project Light had traveled with her. They had kept it a surprise. All Elsie had been told was that someone had read her poems and wanted to meet her. She had no idea it was him. Until she walked down the stone path, heart pounding, and saw Keanu Reeves sitting quietly beneath a cedar tree. Their first words. Keanu looked up, and his face lit with the kind of smile that made strangers feel like family. "You must be Elsie." She nodded, stunned. "You're real." He chuckled, standing up. "So are you." They sat together on the bench. Not a word for a full minute. Just two souls, one who had spoken a truth and one who had carried it. Finally, Keanu spoke. "I read every word of your letter. Your words helped change the world, Elsie." Her voice was barely a whisper. "But I'm just a nobody." He looked at her, gentle, serious. "There's no such thing." The journal. Elsie handed him her notebook. "I brought this. It's full of stuff I've written since that night. Since, well, you know." Keanu opened it carefully. The first page read, "The day I didn't disappear." He didn't read the rest aloud. He didn't need to. Just knowing she wrote it was enough. Tears filled his eyes. He closed the book, placed it gently on his lap, and said, "Elsie, your story helped millions, but most importantly, it helped you. That's the power of being brave enough to stay." A surprise in the woods. As they walked through the pine trail behind the retreat center, Keanu guided Elsie to a small clearing. A circle of smooth stones lay at the center. A tree stood tall in the middle, a plaque at its base. Elsie stepped forward and read it aloud. "The Whisper Tree, planted in honor of every voice that almost went unheard, especially the brave ones who chose to stay." Her mouth fell open. Keanu smiled. "We planted it last month. It's dedicated to all the kids like you." She stared at the plaque, then turned to him. "Why me?" Keanu kneeled beside her, placed a hand on the stone. "Because when the world was loud and cruel, you stayed. That's the kind of courage I hope every child finds one day." The viral reunion. Someone, somewhere, perhaps a volunteer, had captured a photo from a distance. It showed Keanu and Elsie seated under the whisper tree, her head resting gently on his shoulder as they watched the wind dance through the branches. The photo was uploaded anonymously with no caption. And yet, it went viral within hours. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. The photo was shared alongside Elsie's poem. It became a symbol of the entire movement. Not a brand, not a meme, but a moment where humanity chose to pause and remember itself. One last interview. Keanu never liked interviews. But for Project Light's first international broadcast, he agreed to one condition. It would be a conversation, not about movies or fame, but about moments. And he had one request. That Elsie co-host with him. The producers were hesitant, but Keanu insisted. They sat side by side in a small studio. Elsie with her journal open, Keanu with his quiet strength. The interviewer asked, "Keanu, looking back, what do you think was the most powerful thing you said during that viral interview?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He looked at Elsie, then smiled, and said, "It wasn't what I said. It's what she wrote. I thought my life was too quiet to matter. But your quiet made me loud inside." That's the line that changed the world. Elsie's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she reached for his hand and whispered into the mic, "And your kindness gave my voice permission to exist." The last letter. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the original interview, The quiet voice posted a handwritten note from Keanu on its homepage. No video, no photo, just these words. To everyone reading this, I'm just a man who listened one day instead of talking. But it turns out when you listen, you hear pain, you hear joy, you hear people like Elsie. This world doesn't need more noise, it needs more noticing. So if you take anything from all of this, let it be this. Be the person who sees others, especially the quiet ones, especially when no one else does. And never, ever underestimate the power of staying kind when the world gives you every reason not to be. With love, Keanu Reeves. The world after. The phrase quiet power was added to school curricula in 12 countries. Public libraries began hosting Elsie nights, where teens could read their journals aloud. Barbershops, classrooms, prison programs, and hospitals still used Keanu's words to begin conversations that saved lives. And beneath the whisper tree in Oregon, every autumn, people from around the world came to leave notes, prayers, and poems. Each one a voice that once almost went unheard. Each one now echoing, beautifully, into eternity.